Nothing in this podcast is intended as investment advice, and the people in this podcast may hold positions in the stocks they talk about. Do not buy any investment based solely on a tip or recommendation. Please do your own research.
So here we have the Midweek Takeaway. I'm here to welcome Nick Thurlow from HAMak Gold. Welcome, Nick. How's things going?
Great, thanks. And we've had a busy few weeks, as you can see from share price and the news we've put out. It's been a very interesting time. Not boring at all.
Yeah, you've been a task to get hold of. I can tell you that for sure.
Yeah, my schedule's been kept busy, kept very full. I have to be honest.
Yes, but I understand you have been busy and you've been meeting investors and such like. But let's look at the announcements anyway. Your most recent announcement there was that you purchased 20 Bitcoin. So almost that's the starting gun, I presume, in terms of where you're going. And you've created this deal now with Archimex in terms of the UK FCA ability to hold your Bitcoin. So
Archimex.
Archimex. So tell us more about this.
Well, we looked at a number of things. I think down the road, our goal here is to build sort of best-in-class partnerships. We've looked at a lot of people, and for this first deal, and we wanted to keep it in the UK. We're going to be having to be compliant with the FCA and follow best practice. And we thought if we go with a UK firm which is fully FCA regulated with crypto, that helps us. Plus, no FX risk. It's GBP. There were lots of things. And then when we spoke to the team there, we were very confident with the way they approached this. It was a very seamless onboarding process. It was an easy way to trade, and they're going to our custody for now. And, there was another part, they got a very strategic investment a couple of years ago with Aberdeen Asset Management. And so, we were very confident with their ability to deliver what we needed, and it is about just, I think the point that we talked about a couple of weeks ago, and, something we'll talk about again today, I'm sure, is how we differentiate ourselves from our competitors and, giving ourselves a really good team around us, highly regulated, highly experienced, and that can deliver what we need and make us stand out in the market, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we talked about where all the finance is going to come from. And I think we agreed last time it really wasn't going to come from Mr. and Mrs. Joe Bloggs investing, their £10,000. You were going to be looking for, bigger investors to come in to fund this. So is that what you've been busy doing, as well as all the administration last while?
I tell you, the reality is you've got to get the balance right. Okay, we have a different challenge as a main board listed company. Our rules are different from some of our competitors on Aquis and AIM. So we do have to deal with a slightly different regulatory compliance model. We will undoubtedly at some point offer some more shares to the public. I think it's likely. But I think if we want to get to the size we want to get to in the time frame we want to, we'll have to look at all our options. I'm a big believer in looking at acquisition of companies, classic M&A, large-scale tier one investors coming in as effectively long-term silent partners. So it's about getting the mix of the investment right. Then you look at what MicroStrategy did with maybe funds and convertible loan notes. So for us, I'll just be honest, all options are on the table. And I think our goal is to deliver a balanced approach that serves the shareholder well. I think if you keep just doing retail stuff, eventually you'll sort of dilute the shareholder a little bit, I think. I haven't done the math on it, but it doesn't seem always the best way to do it. So, we spend a lot of time every week looking at all our options, and we've had a lot of options pitched to us in the last few weeks, as you can imagine, as a relatively hot stock. And not just the share price, but I think the one thing that's done, we've been pleasantly surprised about is that the volumes have been good. So it's been good two-way business. And I think we want to make sure that we do the right thing for everyone as for long-term growth and balance out how we raise more capital. Because undoubtedly the challenge is always how you raise more capital. But we have a lot of options on the table today.
So from the point of view of, you talk about going out and buying, are we talking about going and potentially buying gold assets or other Bitcoin companies? What type?
Well, I think the truth is you look at the one which delivers the best shareholder value. I think if we have as we get more capital in, Carl and the gold team are going to be analysing some things. He's actually in Liberia right now on the next phase of our FAU joint venture on the Liberian stuff. We've looked at some deals. There's some deals around in Ghana. There's some deals in Zimbabwe that we will continue to do due diligence on the gold assets. And then on the other thing, if we're in the digital asset treasury space, you look at all the other people who are there and where would be the strategic partnerships? Could we I think we have the attractiveness of being main board. What if we looked at some other companies in that space? What if we looked at providers, licenses? But I think there's a way to grow that isn't just issuing retail shares. That's the truth. I mean, we want to be differentiated by how we're looking at this. And it's, genuinely, I know we've got to always be a bit careful about forward-looking statements, but we want to be a big company. So how do you do that? You can't just do that by issuing 100 million of retail shares, right? It's not going to happen. So that's not the challenge, but that's the balance is the key part. How do we do that delivers for all people concerned, all our shareholders?
Yeah, because even the people who want to invest, and maybe it's large sums of money, they're depending on a return. They're not going to be giving it to you from a charity point of view. So there has to be meat on the bone for everybody. How do you think you're going to be able to balance that in terms of going forward?
There's no easy answer to it. I think, I'm a bit old school, so I look at things like, what are our assets? Do they return anything? Can we make some income? Like, we're going to make some income on our gold assets this year, okay? So that's why the mix is quite good. Like, we will be getting cash from our gold assets this year. If you just sit on Bitcoin, unless you do some, slightly higher risk things like staking or anything else, there isn't necessarily a yield, right? So we have to look at how you can, I'd like a company that has some income in it. So how do you do that? And that means a balanced portfolio of assets, and that can mean anything. That could be, digital assets, gold assets, precious metal assets, company assets. And, I always tell the story, Amazon started out as effectively a secondhand bookstore, book delivery company, and they've done pretty good diversifying. And I think you can learn a lot. I think if you get very good at one thing, you can grow. And I think the one thing we want to be known as is a very well-run company. And if we can do that first with our board appointments, and you mentioned the last call was about, the last RNS was about the Bitcoin, but we've got the Nicola's announcements this morning, which is another very big, piece of the puzzle for me. I mean, I've worked with Nicola before, and bringing someone of her experience onto the board adds 30 plus years of top level institutional experience to a team that, that we don't necessarily, it's a slightly different experience that none of us have. And I mean, I've got a banking background, but she's got asset management. She's, very, very well known in the city.
Yeah. So coming on to the announcement that's just come out. So Nicola Horlick, tell us a bit more. She's going to be a non-executive director.
Yeah.
Obviously, lots of connections with the city, lots of connections with, I think, Aberdeen Asset Management, as we've said before, and also connections, I think, quite heavily with the pension funds in the UK.
Well, Nicola's, I worked with Nicola for a few years at Bramdean in 2020, just around COVID time. But, her background with SG Warburgs and then Morgan Grenfell, she's had a storied career in the asset management space. I think at one point she was maybe one of the largest female asset managers in the world, managing many billions. And she's worked, with people like CalPERS. I'm not sure about Aberdeen. I know she knows Aberdeen, but I think she's done work with them as well. But she has done lots of business with institutional pension funds. And I think we talked about this last time, was that part of the reason the attractiveness of the UK right now is that UK institutions are pretty heavily underweight digital assets. You don't even have to call them crypto anymore. It doesn't be Bitcoin. It's just digital assets. So bringing someone like Nicola on board with her experience. It's one phone call to someone she's known for 20 years to have a meeting and say, could we have a chat about this? And that's different from some of us going through our contacts to get with someone. That's why you bring people of her caliber on the board. Same thing with Dr. Laffer. When we need an introduction to someone in the States, it's a phone call he's already got on speed dial. So that's the caliber of people we're bringing on board now to make, and we'll bring another 2 or 3 on board as well in the next few weeks, I imagine, just to round that out. And it's bringing a real high level of experience into a company that's, has a long-term view of this. It's not a...
I think when you say that the pension funds underweight is sort of undermining it slightly, because I think they just don't even have access to it. So right now it's zero. I can't imagine how many billions it would be, even if they went to 1 or 2% of digital assets, which I think in the long run they're going to have to do if it's an asset class.
Well, especially given how their competitors in the States are in it and have done well on it. So they're at a competitive disadvantage. So yeah, look, we're not quite sure how this space will run out. I think there's still a lot of work to be done with the FCA about who can do it, when we can do it, how we do it. The regulatory regime here in the UK is still a work in progress. But I think if we set ourselves up, which is our goal, to be the Rolls-Royce company to deal with, the upside is very big, as you said. A very tiny proportion of UK pension funds going in here would be an avalanche of money. And that's it's the niche we've looked at, and that's why we're setting ourselves up that way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Question that many people have been posing me in the group, in the Telegram group that we have, and if you're not a member, please join, and you'll have lots of information.
I was going to ask you about that. I wasn't sure if you wanted me in there or not.
Yeah, there's 300 people in there right now, so and we're growing fast, so hopefully it's going to be more people as time goes by. Jonathan Dixon, my good friend at OTC, have you had any communications with him about sorting out an OTC listing for yourselves?
I haven't done anything personally, but the team is looking at lots of options, and I am certain that's been one of them. I mean, it's not an overnight process, so we're a listed company. It would be remiss of us not to look at the OTC, but who knows when and how we do that. I mean, it's early stages. As you know from trying to get hold of me, the last month has been crazy busy getting people in place, offices, setting up our accounts, getting our Bitcoin done. So, we focused on some of the sort of, I think what we're trying to do is say, look, we've nearly delivered on phase one of what we announced when we did the initial fundraise. Other markets, other sort of partnerships is sort of getting into that phase two that we will look at probably early September after our close period, and we're going to issue our half-year results probably mid-September or somewhere around there. So yeah, I think this is phase two, which is a lot of work is going on to it in the team. So we'll look at, and I think this is what I think you and I have spoke offline about. This is that part of what we're trying to do is look at all our options. I can't put my hand on heart and say I know exactly what the best way to do it is. But there's a lot of people in our industry now where you can see what's worked and what sometimes hasn't worked. And so we'll take that on board, but then obviously make our own decisions based on what we think is the right way to go. OTC obviously is one of them. I mean, I think if you increase liquidity and options for people, it's probably a good thing. I haven't really studied it yet, but I will. It's something the team's looking at, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that would... Obviously, if you do have the vision to be a big company in inverted commas, then an OTC listing is really just a forerunner to being listed on the New York Stock Exchange as well as London or vice versa. So, but that's maybe many moons down the line. But
honestly, I don't even know how long it takes. I've got to be honest. So it's one of many things we're looking at. I mean, you look at, if you're a listed company, as I say, you've got to keep all your options open, and I think we're in an exciting space. And we have a very good team on board now. We each bring something different, and one of our sort of biggest tasks each week is to divide up who does what, which is a challenge.
And I suppose the question that everybody's asking, you've partially already answered it. Do you feel that you're going to have the ability to attract capital in a very significant way over the coming weeks and months?
That's the clear goal. I mean, what we want to look at all our options. I think we talked about this before, is that, a pure retail approach may not be the best one. What we want to bring on is some tier one investors that put in reasonable size and are basically long-term partners for us that sit on the balance sheet for a long time. I think the team we're building gives people confidence that we're going to deliver that. So really, we've been focused on putting in a excellent team, excellent regulatory set of partners in terms of how we buy Bitcoin, how we store it, how we manage it going forward. When we get that right, the caliber of people and how we then close people up will be easier. And I think that's what we're saying is that we've talked about this many times. The main board gives us more challenges, but I think if we get it right, and your bottom line is when we get it right, the mix I think we will have a different mix than some of our competitors. So we've been approached by so many people in the last 2 weeks about money raising and putting money with us. So there's not a shortage of choices, and it's just a matter of we want to take a measured, sensible view of how do we deliver best long-term shareholder value. So it's a bit of a waffly answer, but you can appreciate there's a lot of moving parts here, and I don't doubt that getting money is never easy, but we have lots of choices, lots.
Okay, so the question you're not going to want to answer then, when you say significant, what does significant quantum mean?
I'm not sure what the SBA forward-looking rules are. I mean, I can.
I don't think answer that question, but
well, I think I'll answer a generic way, and if it's wrong, you'll have to delete it. I don't think you're meaningful till you've got a $100 million balance sheet. Honestly, you're a small company to that point. So I think as a goal.
To say that.
Yeah, I think as a goal, that's a minimum. That's where you start becoming, if we wanted to go to a large UK pension fund, I think that's the size we need to be so they can see that we're serious. That's kind of my non-regulatory
and then the
answer.
pension fund's going to come along and say, I want to give you 0.5% of my funds, so I'll give you a 50 million or I'll give you 100 million. That's what they're going to do.
Yeah, and so we appreciate that we need a certain size to have that conversation. But so that everything we're doing is building to be that size of company. I mean, there's no hidden market information. That's just me being genuinely honest. That's what we want to do. So, and I think that's what, people like Nicola, Dr. Laffer, and the rest of the board that we'll build out will all be indicators of that's our approach.
So Dr. Laffer, I had a question myself. Is he the famous Laffer curve?
He is indeed.
In terms of the tax situation. So just for anyone who doesn't know, Dr. Laffer, I can hardly say invented it, but he put his name against the tax curve that says the higher the tax rate, actually, it comes to a point where you actually get less income from tax receipts than more income at a certain point.
Interestingly, what he said is he's the first to admit that he didn't invent it, right? But he did sort of bring it to prominence and it got his name in it. But if you think of it as common sense, if you tax everyone at 0, you raise no tax. If you tax everyone at 100%, you're probably not going to make much tax either because no one will want to do it. So the optimum tax rate is somewhere between a 0 and 100, which isn't narrowing it down much. But, he would genuinely argue from his perspective that the optimum tax rate is probably below 50. So, he is a sort of a more right-wing economist. He's saying less taxes. And I think there's a lot of evidence. It's a debate whether it's true, but I think that in general, this is going to be a hot topic in the UK in the coming years as tax rates go up. I think we'll know in a couple of years if you raise taxes, do the tax receipts go up or down? We'll know, right?
I think we're already at the top of the Laffer curve in the UK because no doubt tax receipts are going to go down. It was announced last week that they're taking less capital gains tax this year because they put the rates up. So shock horror.
And that's pretty much what his curve says. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, that was just a piece of info that everybody can do. Listen, you're going to have more news coming out over the coming weeks, I presume. So I look forward to chatting to you more about that. Maybe we can also get Nicola on and have a chat with her about how she can help you in progressing this business. But anything else you'd like to say to the shareholders?
Well, thank you for being on the journey with us. That's the first part. I mean, the one thing you realize when you're relatively sort of not small stock, but sort of a penny stock as we are, is that there's going to be volatile days. I mean, you and I both had a chat a couple of weeks ago about a rumor in the market, which I think at one point we were down 30% on a completely false rumor.
Yeah,
this is part and parcel of where we are. And I think our goal is to grow to the point where there's a little bit less volatility. But if you stick with the journey, I think it'll be a good one for us all. That's really the positive message to end on.
And to this point, your share price has grown significantly on what you have painted as a picture of what's going to happen. The money hasn't come yet because ultimately you've only bought 20 Bitcoin. But people are buying this on the theory that all of these pieces put into place is going to attract large amounts of capital.
And I think the key thing to think about that though is it sounds bizarre, but we've literally been at the helm for like 4 and a bit weeks, right? And I've done a lot of tier 1 investments. When you deal with very big investors, banks, funds, 4 weeks due diligence is quick for them. So when, we haven't really gone into the full marketing mode yet because we want to be bigger and better and really well positioned for it. So, I think there's got to be an element of patience that when you're dealing with large numbers, the deals just take a little bit longer. That's just the reality. And, in the meantime, we're going to have a slightly more volatile share price than some investors would like. But it's I think there's a clear journey here. We've set ourselves what I hope is a differentiated path of, serious long-term growth. That's really the picture we're trying to paint.
Yeah, good luck. And may your candle burn at both ends, which it seems to be doing.
I know, but I tell you what, it'd be nice just to have a week off somewhere. So just hopefully, maybe the doldrums of the end of August when everyone's on the beach somewhere, we can have a week off and then we can.
I would suggest you do this to recharge your batteries for the next quarter.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's great talking to you.
Yeah, and you. And we look forward to talking to you in the not too distant.
Absolutely. Thanks, bud.
This podcast was brought to you by Roast PR Limited. If you would like to appear on a future episode of The Sunday Roast, please email admin@thesundayroast.net.